Imagine a world 3,000 years ago thriving with powerful empires. The Egyptians building magnificent temples in the Valley of the Kings. The Hittites in Anatolia, masters of iron and chariots. The Mycenaeans in Greece, the heroes of Homer's epics, building fortress palaces. For centuries, this interconnected world of the late Bronze Age was a hub of trade, culture, and power. Palaces gleamed with gold, ships laden with copper and tin crisscrossed the Mediterranean, and armies of bronze-clad warriors seemed invincible. But then, in the span of a single lifetime, it all came crashing down. Cities burned, empires vanished, and writing itself was forgotten in many places. This wasn't just a recession or a bad war. It was a societal collapse so complete that historians call it the first ever Dark Age. What happened? What brought these mighty warriors and their shining civilizations to their knees? The answer isn't a single event, but a perfect storm of catastrophe that swept across the ancient world. Let's start our journey in Greece with the Mycenaeans. Think of King Agamemnon, the legendary leader from the Trojan War. He and his fellow kings ruled from massive hilltop citadels like Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos. These were not just palaces. They were centers of a highly centralized, bureaucratic system. Scribes used a script called Linear B to meticulously record every jar of olive oil, every fleece of wool, and every bronze spearhead that went in and out of the palace storehouses. Their entire economy, their entire military, was built on this top-down control. The king and his warrior elite controlled the best land, the production of bronze, and the long-distance trade that brought in essential materials like tin. This system worked beautifully as long as everything was stable. But its complexity was also its greatest weakness. Like a house of cards, if you remove one crucial piece, the whole structure is at risk. Now, let's talk about their warriors. The Mycenaean warrior was a formidable sight. They were decked out in elaborate bronze armor. The most famous example is the Dendra panoply, a full suit of interlocking bronze plates, complete with a boar's tusk helmet. They fought from heavy, two-wheeled chariots, which were less like battlefield taxis and more like mobile firing platforms for archers and spear throwers. These warriors were the elite, the 1%ers of their time. Their gear was incredibly expensive, requiring immense resources and specialized craftsmen. The entire state was organized to support this elite warrior class. But what happens when that support system starts to crumble? What happens when the tin needed for bronze stops arriving? Or when the harvests fail and you can't feed the craftsmen and the soldiers? The Mycenaean war machine, so impressive and dominant, was actually incredibly fragile. Then disaster struck. Around 1200 BC, the palaces started to burn. Pylos, Mycenae, Tiryns, one by one, these great centers were violently destroyed and abandoned. For a long time, the blame was placed squarely on invaders, the mysterious Dorian Greeks from the north. But archaeology tells a more complicated story. While some sites show clear signs of attack, others seem to have been rocked by massive earthquakes. The Greek mainland is very seismically active. Imagine a series of powerful earthquakes, what some archaeologists call an earthquake storm, toppling the massive stone walls of the citadels, disrupting trade routes, and wrecking harbors. This would have been a devastating blow, weakening the central authorities and causing widespread chaos. But earthquakes alone don't explain the full picture. Evidence from a place called the Palace of Nestor at Pylos gives us a chilling clue. Just before its destruction, the Linear B tablets speak of watchers guarding the coast. They were desperately gathering bronze to be reforged into weapons and making religious offerings. They were preparing for an attack, but from whom? This is where we meet the most infamous figures of the Bronze Age collapse, the Sea Peoples. Egyptian records describe them as a coalition of different groups from across the Mediterranean who came by sea, a migrating horde with their families in tow, destroying everything in their path. Pharaoh Ramesses III in Scriceo says, "No land could stand before their arms." They smashed the Hittite Empire, laid waste to cities in Syria and Cyprus, and then set their sights on Egypt. Who were these Sea Peoples? It's one of history's greatest mysteries. They weren't a single nation, but a confederation. The names Egypt gives them, like the Paliset, Sherdon, and Shekelesh, hint at origins in the Aegean, Anatolia, and maybe even Sardinia or Sicily. One compelling theory is that they weren't just foreign invaders. They were the victims of the chaos themselves. Think about it. If your city was destroyed by an earthquake, or if years of drought ruined your farm, what would you do? You might join up with other desperate, displaced people, get on a boat, and go looking for a new home, taking it by force if necessary. The Sea Peoples were likely a mix of pirates, mercenaries, and refugees, all products of a system that was already breaking down. They were a symptom of the collapse, not its sole cause. And that brings us to the most powerful and perhaps the most insidious factor of all, climate change. By studying tree rings, pollen samples, and lakebed sediments, scientists have pieced together a picture of the climate around 1200 BC. And it's not pretty. It seems the eastern Mediterranean was hit by a prolonged period of severe drought. Less rain meant failed harvests. Failed harvests meant famine. Famine meant people couldn't pay their taxes in grain to the palaces. It meant social unrest, starvation, and migration. The centralized palace economies of the Mycenaeans and Hittites, which depended on agricultural surplus, were starved at their very source. The complex trade networks for tours. No food, no trade, no bronze. A warrior can't fight if he's starving, and you can't equip an army if your supply lines have vanished. So, let's put it all together. It's not a simple story of a causing bee. It's a system's collapse, a domino effect. Imagine you're a Mycenaean king. First, a prolonged drought weakens your agricultural base. Your people are hungry and restless. Then, a massive earthquake shatters your citadel walls and disrupts communication. As your power weakens, internal rebellions might break out. Your ability to trade for tin is gone, so you can't produce new bronze weapons. Your expensive, chariot-based army is now a liability you can't afford to maintain. And just then, as you're at your weakest, reports come in of strange ships on the horizon. The sea peoples, themselves displaced by the same crises, now coming to take what's left. It's the perfect storm. The mighty Bronze Age warrior, with his glorious armor and chariot, was not defeated by a single, superior enemy. He was made obsolete by a world that had fundamentally changed around him. The very system that created and sustained him was the source of his own downfall. The aftermath was profound. In Greece, the great palaces were gone. The population plummeted. The art of writing linear B was lost for over 400 years. People abandoned the ruined cities and reverted to a simpler, poorer, village-based life. A dark age descended. But this collapse, as devastating as it was, also paved the way for something new. The old, rigid, top-down palace systems were gone. In their place, new, more flexible societies began to emerge. The Iron Age dawned, not because iron was inherently better than bronze, but because its raw materials were more common and didn't require complex, long-distance trade. The fall of the old warrior elite cleared the way for new forms of social organization, new political ideas, and eventually the rise of the Greek city-states, the polis, which would lay the foundations for Western civilization. The story of the fall of the Bronze Age warriors is a powerful lesson from history. It shows us how even the most powerful and sophisticated civilizations are not immune to collapse. It reminds us how interconnected we are and how vulnerable our complex systems can be to a convergence of crises, whether it's climate change, economic disruption, or social upheaval. The bronze armor and a fearsome reputation couldn't save them when the foundations of their world crumbled. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey into the past interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.